What's going on, guys? We are back. We got a brand new Cappy Army video about China preparing for nuclear war. This is going to be really interesting. Cappy has some of the best content on YouTube, man, when it comes to this kind of this content sphere. So please go check him out, like, share all his stuff. I'll tag him in the title of the video like I always do. Um, so let's I want to mention a couple of things. China is pretty much widely regarded to be a bad actor country for decades. They're also widely regarded to be the United States of America's number one threat, not only militarily but also economically, because of how much business and resources the US outsources to China, how many supplies we get from China. So when people make the argument, and I see this a lot, which is kind of insane to me, but I've seen a lot of people claim that China would defeat the United States of America militarily. I think that is so beyond delusional, it's crazy. The United States has more advanced technology, newer technology, better equipment. There, you name it, it's better. But on paper, you could say that China has the largest standing army, which doesn't really matter too much, in my opinion, especially in modern warfare when one FPV drone can take out 5 soldiers. It doesn't matter how many infantrymen you have always. That's not always a main deciding factor of a battle. Also, on paper, statistically, China has the largest standing navy, the largest amount of actual ships, naval ships. But what they don't mention in the statistics is that's counting all of their extremely old ships, warships. Also, these smaller gunboats that basically they just mount. They're like fast moving gunboats that they just mount some kind of a machine gun or something on, kind of like Iran does in the Strait of Hormuz. They also count those in their metrics of for the Navy numbers. So we have to take those numbers with a grain of salt. The bottom line is I think the United States would stomp China in a full-scale war. Anyways, this is going to be interesting. Something worth mentioning as well is the fact that China has had its eyes set on Taiwan, believing that Taiwan is rightly theirs by historical means. This is their province, kind of like Russia believes that Ukraine is theirs. Also, excuse me, what a lot of people don't know, unless they're in this kind of industry and they talk about this stuff for a living, is that Taiwan makes 90 to 95% of the most rare microchips. The microchips that go in the biggest and most modern, most futuristic tech equipment, machinery, stuff like that. 90 to 95% is coming out of Taiwan. That is huge. So, I'm gonna do the Trump hands. Huge. This is huge. So, China doesn't mention it outright, but I can almost guarantee they want their hands on that microchip technology and manufacturing a production facility. So this is going to be cool, man. I'm excited. We can jump into it. Today's the last day for our ORC SHASHLIK t-shirt, I believe. I'm not sure, actually, so it might already be off, but the new t-shirt's coming. It should be on tomorrow. Let's jump into it, guys.
The US intelligence community picked up something shocking when going through earthquake data, as one does. They found a remote seismic station in Kazakhstan had detected a very small earthquake that only had a magnitude of 2.75, but its point of origin was extremely suspicious because it came from near China's Lop Nor nuclear site, which is where they've tested atomic bombs until they stopped in 1996. The Pentagon now believes it was a top secret Chinese nuclear weapons test designed to be hidden from the rest of the world. China's foreign minister shot back, saying that the allegations are completely groundless and that the US is only claiming this to resume their own nuclear weapons tests. It was a geopolitical equivalent of he said, she said nuclear weapons edition. So who was lying? And why does that even matter when the United States government already has many times more nuclear weapons? In an extremely rare response, the US intelligence agencies then decided to go public with their assessment. There's a planet-wide surveillance network designed to catch anyone trying to secretly detonate a nuclear weapon. So don't even try it. It's made up of seismic sensors that are buried in remote deserts, hydrophones listening beneath the oceans, and atmospheric detectors constantly searching for radioactive particles. It's a global burglar alarm for nuclear weapons. From this, US intelligence provided declassified proof that China's building.
That's good to know, man. I didn't know that there were that many countermeasures in place to detect the use of nuclear weapons. That's really cool.
Hundreds of new missile silos and rapidly expanding their nuclear arsenal.
The U.S. government is aware that China has conducted nuclear explosive tests. These tests violate test ban commitments.
Just a year later in 2021, analysts at the Pentagon discovered China was building something massive in the middle of the Yunnan Desert. It's located in China's remote northwestern Gansu province, deep inside the country. But before we get into that, today's episode is sponsored by War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made that's available for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. My favorite part is getting to command from over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations, ranging from biplanes and armored cars from the 1920s all the way to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. They have an all-new mobile version for iOS and Android that's got very intuitive controls. How immersive is this game? Incredibly detailed vehicles? Check. Realistic graphics? Check. Authentic sound effects that place you right at the helm of the most powerful war machines of our time? Check, check, and check. It has really impressive cutaway damage X-ray view as well. Join a worldwide community of over 95 million players in epic PvP battles today. War Thunder is available for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. For a limited time, new and returning players on PC and console who haven't played in at least 6 months claim a massive bonus pack that includes the exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 Silver Lions, 7 days of premium account, plus multiple premium vehicles. Just use my link in the pinned comment or the video description. They found a sprawling grid of gigantic inflatable domes scattered across the landscape. Hidden underneath them, China was constructing 120 brand new nuclear missile silos, capable of reaching anywhere in the United States in 30 minutes. It was bad news for everyone who didn't want to die in thermonuclear war. At the same time as China's nuclear weapons program was rapidly expanding, tensions over Taiwan have continued to soar. Xi Jinping warned President Trump during their in-person meeting in China that mishandling disagreements over Taiwan could push both nuclear powers into quote-unquote a dangerous place, which is a very diplomatic way of saying we're very close to ending it all. We'll see how some parts of the nuclear program in China have been transparent, overt, and available for the public to see, while other parts have been strangely hidden, which is very unusual given China's history of nuclear weapon strategy. Since the 1960s, China's nuclear strategy has been fascinating. It's always been defined by kind of doing the absolute bare minimum. They've been a bunch of nuclear slackers, if you will. While the United States and Soviet Union were duking it out, racing to build thousands of warheads during the Cold War, China sat a few plays out and stayed more chill with under 300 warheads in total, barely enough to glass the world. This is because many Chinese strategists argued that matching American numbers was pointless, because a few of their surviving warheads could still devastate major cities in America. Very Sun Tzu meta level strategy there. And the reason any of that is relevant today is because these series of 3 top secret declassified documents that were released by the American intelligence agencies, and they each track China's nuclear weapons development strategy. What they say is that for many decades, it was all about slow, steady, restrained development. The CIA was using human sources on the ground combined with spy photos, specifically highlighting how China does not appear to be joining any kind of arms race. How modest of them. But there's evidence the real reason China only had a few nukes is because they were unable to build thousands. So the declassified documents repeatedly mention limits due to Soviets no longer helping China and difficulty in procuring the expensive and difficult to enrich uranium. China's nuclear forces were so underfunded and such a second thought at the time that they were originally called the Second Artillery Corps. Mao basically said, I don't know, just throw them in with the artillery guys. Because historically, China relied on a handful of old, clunky, liquid-fueled DF-5 missiles in order to reach America, but they had severe limitations. But the problem with those liquid-fueled missiles is that they took hours to fuel up before they could even be launched, so they're sitting ducks during that time period. period. If an American satellite sees you pumping rocket fuel into a silo, the United States knows exactly what you're doing, and they're gonna blow your silo to kingdom come before that missile even leaves the tube. We've all been there. That's why for decades, China relied heavily on underground tunnels and mobile launchers because it lacked a truly survivable ground launch missile option. Its sea-based deterrent was also lacking. So liquid-fueled missiles like the old DF-5 are incredibly fragile. If you transport them when you're in fully fueled mode and you have a fender bender or a slight bump, it would cause the highly corrosive toxic fuel inside to leak and explode, killing everyone inside that mountain. That's a huge party foul in Chinese culture. Therefore, the 2nd Artillery Corps in China had to store the warhead separately from the missile and the fuel, which slows down response time by hours. And they had this terrifying realization that the United States military could easily destroy all of their nuclear-based deterrent in a hypothetical preemptive strike. This is part of what drove the massive modernization effort that we're about to see. So in December 2015, China's 2nd Artillery Corps is officially elevated to a full military branch of its own. They're renamed the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, never to be dead named or lumped in with the artillery again. Along with this promotion came just an obscenely high budget. They took that new money, they got strippers and blow because there's a lot of corruption in China, like seriously. Then they phased out their old dinosaur missiles and got the massive DF-41. This uses solid fuel.
I didn't know that about corruption in China. You would think, I mean, it makes sense, they're communists, but that's interesting. I'd like to learn more about that.
I'm an infantryman, not a scientist, but it's essentially a rubbery, high explosive chemical compound that's poured straight into the rocket casing at the factory and then left to harden. What that means is it doesn't need to be fueled in the field. It's just ready to rock 24/7, able to hit any target in the United States from deep in mainland China. No need to sleep on it to see if you're still mad in the morning, just go straight ahead. These missiles are perfect for China's new static ground-based launch sites. Now, the scale of this nuclear expansion is difficult to comprehend. The infrastructure covers thousands of square kilometers in the desert. The evidence of the buildup is even viewable from outer space, the gigantic Chinese desert.
Look how windy it is out there, dude.
The evidence of the buildup, the infrastructure covers thousands of square kilometers in the desert. The evidence of the buildup is even viewable from outer space. The gigantic Chinese military complex is only now starting to really take shape in the desert. Xi Jinping is building a huge, sprawling web that has launch pads, which are connected to hardened reinforced bunkers, which connect to communications nodes. Each launch silo is placed about 4 kilometers apart from each other to prevent multiple ones from being taken out by one single American missile. Shortly after the UN silo missile discovery, American satellite analysts at Space Force found another huge missile field in Hami in eastern Xinjiang. Reassuring to be able to see the evidence of where the heat death of the Earth may take place from Google Maps. The second field contains 80 new nuclear-capable missile silos. These are run by mysterious octagon-shaped facilities that you can see here. Surrounding the core is this ring of buildings that house military personnel. The third layer is likely storage of military vehicles and ballistic missile launchers. A Reuters analysis wasn't sure what these next buildings here are for, but it's safe to assume it's not humanitarian aid site. Then there are armored bunkers and fortified weapons storage areas. There are massive airfields and rail networks that link to these mysterious octagon bases to then the Hami missile silos. Hans Christensen, who's the director of the Federation of American Scientists and Nuclear Information Project, said, quote, "I've never seen anything quite like it. It's an extraordinary effort. What makes it unique is that it's surrounded by a ring of air defense batteries and electronic warfare equipment that's meant to jam enemy aircraft. The extensive anti-air systems near the nuclear launch silos are extremely unusual. They're not seen in the United States or Russian similar facilities. We'll see that these AA systems are a hint to why China is building these missile silos in the first place. In total, China will now have about 350 nuclear missile silos, about the same as the United States. To put this expansion and scale into perspective, that is more than 10 times the number of silos that China previously operated in their entire history. The current buildup represents one of the biggest reversals and shifts of nuclear policy by any major power since the end of the Cold War. And now, the US intelligence community has assessed that China is racing to double their stockpile of nuclear weapons by 2030. Is it deterrence? Is it coercion? Or something more aggressive? They looked at satellite imagery from 2023 and early 2024, and what they found shocked them. The US military analysts identified at least one brand new horizontal tunnel at the Northern Tunnel test area. The quote-unquote spoil piles of excavated earth and rock totaled more than 1,500 square meters of extra earth. So imagine standing in a man-made cave the size of a tall building. This is what you would be looking at there. And this is a clear indication that China carved out a huge new underground chamber. Analysts observed the construction of at least 2 deep vertical shafts. What spooked them the most is that horizontal tunnels are typically used for low-yield nuclear weapons tests. These tests suggest that Xi Jinping is testing tactical nuclear weapons. Vertical tunnels are typically dug for higher yield nuclear weapons explosions. The reason for this is because they allow for far better containment of highly radioactive material. The US assessed that China used what's called a decoupling method, so they detonated the device in a large underground cavern like this to muffle the explosive force and dampen the seismic signature. It would almost have been a relief if they had been testing giant strategic warheads instead, because leaders are less likely to use those. But we'll see how a low-yield tactical nuclear weapon is more likely to actually be used during a conflict. But the United States maintains roughly 5,000 nuclear warheads. Russia has even more. Both countries spent decades lecturing everyone else about strategic nuclear stability. So why is China's nuclear expansion right now anyone's concern? Head of Stratcom, Air Force General Anthony J. Cotton, called it a quote-unquote strategic breakout that was moving at breathtaking speeds, because many of the silos appeared to be under construction simultaneously. What's most shocking is how quickly these all appeared. The pace suggests that Beijing is racing against someone or something, because nuclear planners can usually adapt to gradual changes. What worries them, though, is when a country suddenly begins building hundreds of silos, rapidly increasing the warhead stockpile and expanding the nuclear infrastructure needed to support much larger forces, all at the same time. From Washington's point of view, they're concerned specifically about the speed and scale of this expansion. That's what we need to pay attention to. In response, some officials in South Korea and Taiwan are requesting that the US redeploy nuclear weapons in the region as part of a NATO-style nuclear sharing umbrella in Asia. America once had 950 nuclear weapons stationed in South Korea. But why run low-yield nuclear tests? One hint was when Xi Jinping referenced the Thucydides trap in his speech when President Trump visited. This is a theory that argues war becomes more likely when a rising power threatens to overtake an established power. In other words, Xi Jinping was suggesting to Trump that the United States and China could be drifting towards the same kind of great power collision that has sparked major wars throughout history. Experts have 2 different opinions on why China's fast building up their nuclear force. Many national security experts in Washington believe that it's to make sure that the American military cannot credibly knock out their arsenal with a first strike. A lot has changed when it comes to precision weapons since the Cold War. Back then, you couldn't fire a missile at something the size of a penny from hundreds of miles away from standoff distance. Now, American long-range conventional missiles like the JASSM-ER and America's expansion of their stealth bomber fleet, where they're building over 225 new B-21 bombers, has changed this calculation. The B-21 is explicitly designed for what the military planners call inside-out operations. That means the stealth bomber is built to penetrate deep into the Chinese mainland, flying potentially completely undetected right through their air defense networks, which is now what explains why there's so many air defense systems around these octagon Chinese nuclear sites. Once inside, the B-21 bomber can use conventional bombs against China's mobile nuclear missile launchers right in their own sanctuaries, before the Chinese even know that they're under attack. During the Iran War, B-2 stealth bombers and fighter jets hit Iran's underground buried missile silos. But in a war with China, these missile silos are dual use. That means you don't know which have conventional missiles and which are armed with nuclear missiles. One reason China may be building so many of these missile silos is because the sea-based leg of their nuclear deterrent still has a weakness. China operates this fleet of Jin-class ballistic missile submarines, but American defense officials have long assessed that these Chinese nuclear submarines are significantly louder than their American counterparts, and they can be found, fixed, and destroyed. Hundreds of hardened silos may be Beijing's way of compensating for weaknesses elsewhere in the nuclear triad. However, the other perspective of China's nuclear buildup comes from the Carnegie Foundation researcher Tong Zhao, who gave an alternative take. He says that Xi Jinping attaches great geopolitical importance to nuclear weapons as a means of demonstrating China's power. To Xi Jinping, it's a symbolic use of military power. It's designed to influence America's perception of the balance of power with Taiwan. The reason Mao Zedong in the 1950s said that he originally wanted to develop nuclear weapons was to be free of coercion, free of powers with more nukes telling them what to do. Missile defense has always created a strange arms race. Every interceptor encourages an adversary to build more offensive missiles. Every offensive missile encourages the defender to build more interceptors. The result is a technological treadmill where both sides spend billions of dollars trying to solve a problem that the other side immediately recreates. But not all of these silos will actually be filled with nuclear weapons in them. Some are going to be empty. This tactic is straight from the old Cold War playbook. It's called sponge theory. You want to sponge up as many hits as possible. You dig 250 holes in the ground for silos, but you only put actual nuclear missiles in, say, about 50 of them. The other 200 are empty decoys. The enemy then absolutely has no idea which silos are loaded and which ones are just empty concrete tubes. Therefore, it tries to guarantee that destroying China's nuclear arsenal in a preemptive strike, an enemy force would have to expend over 250 nuclear weapons and missiles to hit every hole out in the desert.
You would think we would have, or there would be technology that could see into these holes to see if they were, not only if they were occupied with a missile, but what kind of missile. I'm sure the US has a satellite that could do something like that.
But there's another theory, one that is a bit more aggressive and significantly more nefarious. Some intelligence analysts believe China is actively seeking what's called nuclear overmatch. For a long time, China's maintained a strict no first use policy, meaning they publicly promised that they would never be the first ones to drop a nuke in a conflict. But if they build a massive, unquestionable nuclear arsenal, including those low-yield tactical nukes that they've been secretly testing underground at Lop Nur, it creates a terrifying nuclear umbrella. Under this massive nuclear umbrella, the PLA could launch a D-Day style conventional invasion of Taiwan. They would be betting everything on the assumption that the United States would be entirely unwilling to intervene and save the island if it meant risking a massive nuclear exchange that could wipe Los Angeles, Seattle, and New York off the...
Which is probably a reasonable tactic by China, because look at Russia and Ukraine, right? Russia, granted, Ukraine didn't have one of the most rarest semiconductor processing facilities or manufacturing facilities in it, like Taiwan does, which is obviously a major reason the United States doesn't want China to have it or invade Taiwan. But still, the US has been proven to back off when the country has nukes. And you could say that's a good thing, you could say that's a bad thing, right? Because they don't want to escalate the tensions and cause nuclear war. Okay. That's also, I believe, why why they're pushing so hard against Iran to not get a nuclear weapon, because the US knows once they do, they're kind of out of options. They won't attack them, just like they won't attack Russia.
Map. It is a strategy of nuclear blackmail. In the public consciousness, a nuclear weapon is a city killer. We think of Hiroshima or the massive Tsar bomb tested in the Soviet Union days, but modern military strategy has evolved into a terrifying concept called escalate to de-escalate. Imagine a scenario where the Chinese military launches an invasion of Taiwan. The United States responds by sending 2 massive aircraft carrier strike groups into the Philippine Sea to intervene. In the past, China would have to rely on conventional anti-ship missiles to stop the American fleet. But what if China fires a low-yield tactical nuclear weapon? Not a city killer, but a tiny, relatively speaking, 5 kiloton warhead designed purely to detonate above the ocean. At that localized blast could instantly vaporize the carrier group, but it wouldn't kill millions of civilians. This creates a terrifying dilemma for the US president at this point. Do you respond by launching Minuteman III ICBMs and glassing Beijing, knowing that China will immediately launch their own DF-41s and destroy major cities in North America? Are you willing to trade Los Angeles and New York to avenge a single aircraft carrier fleet in the middle of the ocean? This is why analysts believe China is expanding the Lop Nor facility and why they're building mock aircraft carriers in the desert to fire at. They're testing subcritical designs to perfect these tiny tactical warheads. The vertical shafts and the horizontal tunnels identified by analysts are the exact facilities needed to ensure that these miniature warheads work perfectly. Because nuclear weapons are some of the most complicated death machines ever built, and their functionality needs to be checked and double-checked. The US currently maintains a fleet of about 44 to 50 ground-based interceptors, or GBIs, that are located in silos in Alaska and California. Historically, the United States claimed that these GBIs were just there to shoot down a few rogue accidental missiles that were launched by unpredictable nations like North Korea. If America can use a huge fleet of stealth bombers to hunt down and destroy 80% of China's nuclear arsenal on the ground before they even launch, and then the American use of 50 GBI interceptors can shoot down the remaining 20% of China's missiles, that actually manages to make their nuclear deterrence zero. You have been mathematically negated. While China's digging 250 silos in the desert at this breakneck speed, what is America doing to modernize its own silo fleet? The United States relies on the old aging Minuteman III ICBMs, which have been sitting in holes in Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming since the 70s. The replacement program is called the LGM-35A Sentinel program, but the Sentinel program is currently somewhat of a train wreck. It's $1 billion over budget and suffering from years of scheduling delays. While China uses state-controlled construction companies to pour concrete 24/7 without having to worry about environmental impact studies, this means that the next decade there's going to be a highly dangerous window of vulnerability. China's new massive arsenal of solid-fueled DF-41s will be fully operational, while America will still be relying on some 50-year-old missiles and hoping that the B-21 bomber will roll off the Northrop Grumman assembly line fast enough to fill the gap. If China achieves nuclear parity with the United States in terms of their massive ICBMs, it essentially creates a shield that allows them to use low-yield nukes on the battlefield with impunity, knowing the US won't risk global annihilation. What makes this nuclear weapons buildup different from previous Chinese military modernization efforts is that it cannot be hidden. Submarines with nukes can disappear beneath the earth. Aircraft with nuclear weapons are near impossible to track and are limited in range that they can launch from. But concrete silos scattered across the desert are obviously visible from space for all of us to see. The construction itself is meant to send a message, I think. And the scary thought is China's secret nuclear test may have also been meant to be detected by those seismic systems. Those secret nuclear weapons tests may have been meant as a message as well. To learn more, check out this video about US Black Ops in China or this playlist on Chinese military analysis. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy, ending transmission. Again.
So I'm curious what you guys think about this. I didn't know about the hundreds of nuclear silos, additional nuclear silos being built, but I could have only predicted that China was preparing for war with the US, just like the United States has been preparing for war with China. I know people in the US military who are predicting, and it's actually even talked about like on the news and stuff, but they're predicting war with China in 2027. Some high up officials have said this in the news. So I don't know what kind of information they have, if they've locked into some kind of, or like hacked into some kind of intelligence in China that's showing a full-scale invasion of Taiwan in 2027 or what. But that's when they felt pretty confident about war with China. And I remember they were talking about this back in 2023, so 3 years ago. So I'm interested to see. That would be pretty devastating, man. But it's kind of like a double-edged sword because China's very far away from the United States, which is good. right? But it also takes a lot of resources to get our guys out there. Like if we think about World War II and the Pacific theater of war, when the United States Navy was trying to take out Japan, that was a lot of travel, a lot of resources, crazy logistics. And I could only imagine it would be that times an exponential amount in today's military. So, and versus China. So let me know what you guys think. This is pretty interesting, man. I don't know. That's all I got for you, though. Please go share and show love to Cappy. I love you guys. We'll see you in the next video.